Good morning. I'm really happy to be here with so many advocates for interim housing, folks that have really led this innovative idea and led the takeoff of this across our state. And as I'll talk about, this is really a California issue. Everybody knows we have a large homeless population. What everybody doesn't know is that 67% of our homeless population is unsheltered. Nationally, that's 20%. In New York, for example, it's 5%. So this is a California problem. And what we've seen, especially with the Journal of Health Affairs' recent study, is that over the last 10 years, people on the street are suffering much worse outcomes. They're dying on the street, they're being insulted on the street, they're becoming addicted to drugs on the street. And the key is, how can we move people into shelter? How can we help them rebuild their lives quickly? And especially with the governor's executive order, this is now even more timely. And we're going to discuss how SB 1395 will help save lives by bridging the gap between being unsheltered and finding permanent housing. And we're going to check out some of the impressive and successful interim housing options. We've deployed over 2,000 of these units, as we'll hear, just in the last year or two across the state. And we're going to hear how they're providing shelter for our neighbors and helping people get back on their feet. I live when I'm up in the Capitol, at a hotel a few blocks from here. And every night, as I did last night, when I walk only a few blocks home, I pass people living in doorways on the streets of Sacramento, mere blocks from the Capitol. Unsheltered Californians are at extremely elevated risk of assault, rape, homicide, accidental death, infectious disease, chronic disease. Even if someone experiencing homelessness gets a shelter bed for the night, they're often back out on the streets the next day or kicked out of a longer stay shelter before they're able to find a job and a permanent place to live. And we see the real and dehumanizing aspects of this crisis every day, and we must act with greater urgency. Clearly, our current strategy is not fully working. And as we can see, there's sort of a missing step. And what I'm here to talk about is interim supportive housing is the missing rung on the ladder between being unsheltered and finding, rebuilding your life and finding permanent housing. That's why my colleagues and I are calling for passage of 1395, the Interim Supportive Housing Act. This bill empowers local governments who want to invest, as we'll hear from some today, in interim housing and put a roof over their heads of our unhoused neighbors quickly and at scale. It cuts red tape, streamlines construction, and gets people indoors faster. It also validates interim supportive housing as an appropriate and useful tool in a city's toolkit for addressing unsheltered homelessness. These interim housing units built right here in California by local companies are an effective and efficient strategy. They are high quality, they're inexpensive to construct, safe, comfortable, they can be built fast and made quickly available. One unit behind me is 140 square feet with 2 separate rooms, Wi-Fi, heating, and air conditioning, comes with ADA options, and is built between 90 and 120 days. The other unit is 3D printed using recycled plastic, making it a quality, affordable, and eco-friendly option. And these are only 2 of the options that we'll hear are being used now across the state. They can come on wheels. So again, we can put them quickly. We can put them someplace if we have vacant land for 3 years while we're building a housing project or something, and then we need to move them, we can move them later. They're adaptable and easily relocated. And over 2,000 units across the state, over 500 in San Jose alone, which has been a real model, as we will hear about shortly. We need this tool so that local governments can take advantage of this innovative, but now also proven solution. Let local governments utilize this tool to quickly and inexpensively build these types of modular, non-congregate homes, which again can be relocatable or non-relocatable and can be quickly and inexpensively installed. This option, along with other options available through SB 1395, will help get our homeless brothers and sisters indoors more quickly. So again, we can stabilize them. They can have a place we can know they're going to be, get them medicine, get them support, get them job training, get them back on their feet. I'm really honored to be here with colleagues and leaders from across the state, and also hear from people who have experienced this solution themselves. And I'm going to start out with my Senate colleague from Encinitas. She was formerly on the city council. So when we first started talking about this, she jumped all over this solution because she said this is a practical solution that we need and can scale quickly. Please welcome my colleague from San Diego, Catherine Blakespear.
Well, thank you, Senator Becker, and thank you everyone for being here today. My name is Catherine Blakespear, and I'm the state senator representing San Diego County and Orange County. I'm delighted to be a co-author on this bill, and I want to recognize the leadership of my colleague bringing this forward and working on it for several years to make sure that it can make it across the finish line this year. I've worked on homelessness and housing issues for years now, first as the mayor of the city of Encinitas, and then also here for my first 2 years in the state Senate. And it saddens me that during this time, month after month, homelessness continues to get worse. More people fall into homelessness than exit homelessness every single month in this state. It's clear that we need to do better. We need to create affordable housing, we need interim housing, we need shelters and safe camping areas, and assistance and resources for the unhoused. SB 1395 attacks one part of this problem by removing hurdles and time-consuming constraints to building interim housing. It extends the emergency housing provisions under the Shelter Crisis Act and expands the CEQA exemptions for interim housing projects. In short, it makes it easier and quicker for local governments to pursue interim housing projects and to meet the needs of the unhoused population. When I was walking to this press conference, I identified somebody within the shadow of the Capitol, our state capital in the fifth largest economy, who could very easily utilize one of these tonight. And what you recognize is that we need to have solutions that we see behind us, the practical solutions that are right here, but we also need to have the will. We need local governments to say yes to citing these, and we need to recognize that there is a continuum. There is, where is somebody sleeping tonight? Where are they in 6 months? Where are they in 2 years? And how is it that we are actually owning the problem and then solving the problem? So this Interim Housing Act right here, SB 1395, is a critical part of that. And we all need to invest in the solutions and be able to say yes to things instead of saying no and identifying all of the barriers and hurdles and reasons that the status quo continues. So I firmly believe that our public spaces should be available for the public to use as intended, and people deserve to live inside. So the combination of those two things means that we need solutions like this if we're actually going to solve this problem. SB 1395 will help local governments, and I urge all local governments to consider this option immediately when this bill passes. I want to again thank Senator Becker and the other leaders behind us, city leaders, other legislators, also those who are working in the nonprofit space, to be able to really make a difference here. This is important legislation, and I encourage everyone here to support it. Thank you.
Outside of San Jose, which we will hear from in a moment, probably no jurisdiction in the state has embraced this model as quickly and as successfully as Santa Barbara. And I'm very pleased to have my colleague from Santa Barbara, Assembly Member Greg Hart. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Becker, for inviting me today to join all of us in working on such an important piece of legislation. I'm a principal co-author of this legislation. As Senator Becker mentioned, I represent the Santa Barbara County area, and we have really embraced this solution as an important part of our strategy to bring people indoors in Santa Barbara County. And I'm really proud of the legislation that Senator Becker has authored. This is critically needed to advance this much-needed solution and to bring housing opportunities to the folks who are living outdoors in California. There's an urgency. My colleagues, I think, have spoken to that, and this is, I just want to tell you a little bit about the story in Santa Barbara. During the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, all of us at local government levels understood quickly that we needed to have quick solutions to bring people indoors. It was during the pandemic, we couldn't have folks congregating outdoors, so we introduced a number of different strategies. And early in 22, I visited with Elizabeth Funk up in San Francisco and saw the facilities that Dignity Moves had created there and knew immediately that this was a solution we needed to implement in Santa Barbara County. So Dignity Moves brought their skill set and their philanthropy and their organizational efforts into our county. We worked with the county staff and very quickly stood up our first interim housing project in downtown Santa Barbara in the most historic district in the city. There was great consternation, a lot of people wringing their hands about this site location, but we assured everybody that we had the proper services that were going to go with this facility, and working directly with the neighbors for a long period of time, we were able to get everybody to give this a try. 6 months later, the neighbors that lived immediately adjacent to this project were some of the strongest advocates for the program, and were supporters at future public hearings, urging neighborhoods across the entire county to embrace this strategy because it was so well operated. As a result, many community members wanted to get involved and wanted to support this, and with philanthropic efforts, we have now expanded that program to be about 350 units countywide. You know, putting that in context, our point-in-time count identifies about 2,000 people who are unhoused. So we're making significant progress every year, adding new housing sites. And the best news about it is there's very little resistance from the new communities. They're going to get these projects because they've seen how successful they truly are. In conclusion, I just want to say that the public-private partnership that is potentially represented here by this strategy is one of the key elements. You know, too often in government, local government, state government, we're looking for the one solution, the silver bullet that's going to solve a big problem. And there isn't something like that. There's a whole series of actions that have to take. We need partnerships between the service providers that are going to provide mental health services, drug and alcohol treatment, job training. Those have to be married with funding from counties and cities to provide those services to make sure that they're certain and available and effective. We need private donors to help provide the capital funding to build these facilities, and we need state and local governments to identify the sites to make this happen. And SB 1395 is a critical piece in that effort to try and make it easier to streamline the process to get these units on the ground so that our unhoused neighbors have a place to come indoors as fast as possible. Thank you for your time and attention today.
Thank you, Assemblymember Hart. I mean, many of us here started working on this even just a few years ago, a lot of this was just an idea. But then to hear from the Assemblymember the on-the-ground experience in Santa Barbara, that this is working and that the neighbors like it and are testifying at hearings, and that is just an incredible statement. Thank you so much. Now, I won't steal his thunder. I'll let him tell the story, but I want to really applaud and thank the San Jose Mayor, Matt Mahan, who has really been a leader in this, in coming up with creative solutions and embracing this model. Ladies and gentlemen, Matt Mahan for the City of San Jose.
Thanks, Senator. Appreciate it. Thank you, Senator Becker. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here in our state capitol on this beautiful morning. I really want to thank Senator Becker for identifying interim housing as an effective strategy and working to make it easier for localities across the state to get into the work of ending homelessness in our state. You know, for far too long, we've made one strategy, albeit a critically important one, the construction of brand new affordable housing, which we are strongly supportive of. In fact, we've passed a couple of local taxes in San Jose to increase our investment in permanent, affordable, and supportive housing. But for far too long, we've allowed that or required that be really our primary and sometimes only approach to addressing this urgent crisis on our streets. And the reality is, in my city, in San Jose, it costs us about $1 million a door and often takes 5, 6, or more years to build that new housing. Well, we have the effect, it's not the intention, but we have the effect of condemning people to live and far too often to die on our streets. It's unacceptable. We need more tools in the toolbox. We need those stepping stones as we continue to invest in our affordable housing stock. And that's what we've been doing in San Jose. And I have to say, it was really spurred by another crisis, a public health crisis, the pandemic, which gave us some streamlining opportunities. We knew we needed to move urgently to get people out of crowded encampments into their own individual rooms, to give them some basic dignity and privacy, but importantly, separation from others to control a public health crisis. And we saw what happened when we treated the situation truly like a crisis. We stood up 6 quick build, we call them, interim housing communities ranging from about 50 to 150 units in all across the 500 units of modular interim housing. We were able to build them for as little as about $65,000 a unit and stand them up in less than a year. Since then, these communities have helped over 1,500 people move directly off of our streets. They're fully utilized. We have a waiting list of hundreds of people who want access to one of these units. In fact, roughly 50% of the folks who have come into one of these communities has so benefited from the stability and the services that they have since graduated into permanent housing, and roughly 70% remain off the streets even 3 years later, just because of the benefit of being able to come in and have stability and security and access to supportive services faster, rather than leaving people to be victimized on the streets and see their condition worsen. So I want to say a huge thank you again to Senator Josh Becker, because of his leadership and support from his colleagues. You heard from Senator Blakespear and Assemblymember Hart. We have an opportunity to make it easier for local governments across the state to stand up interim housing sites, the same sites that have helped us in San Jose reduce unsheltered homelessness by nearly 15% over the last 2 years. It'll help us get people indoors faster, which means getting them stabilized and connected to services. It means giving them a fighting chance to get back on their feet. It also will mean for us, the streamlining tools will mean that the 784 additional interim units that we have now approved and planned for and funded in San Jose will get built faster, and we'll be able to change thousands of lives over the coming years. So I can imagine having more of these sites, being able to dedicate them to different populations that need help, from families to homeless neighbors struggling with disabilities or those escaping domestic violence, and being able to really tailor the community and the services to different parts of our homeless population that need that specialized care. They can't wait for a brand new apartment 6 years from now, and they shouldn't have to. So again, thank you to Senator Becker and his colleagues. I am very grateful for his leadership and look forward to seeing more cities and counties become part of the solution to ending unsheltered homelessness, which we can do. I'm confident we can do it, California. We just need to make it easier to build interim housing solutions for everybody. Thank you so much. Thanks, Senator.
All right. Again, we're talking about examples of demonstrated success now with this model. And it gives me a great pleasure. And I will say, when we kicked off this bill, which seems like years ago, but wasn't that long ago, we did it at a interim housing site in San Jose that's only for families and has a phenomenal record. I think 60-70% have now transferred into permanent housing. It's over 80%. Have transferred now into permanent housing. Phenomenal model there in San Jose. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce a woman who called me up when I just started. I got elected about 4 years ago, and the pandemic was hitting, and she said, I have a vision. We're going to do this. We're going to build these models. And I said, that sounds great. Let's do it. And has now led this effort across the state. Gives me great pleasure to invite up my friend Elizabeth Funk, from Dignity, the CEO of Dignity Moves.
Thank you, Josh. It's an honor to be here amongst some of my heroes, because I don't think it's obvious how different this strategy is and how bold of leadership it takes to put forth a strategy like this. For the last decade, as Mayor Mahan suggested, the system has been very clear that the only valid use of taxpayer dollars is permanent housing. And to be clear, that's the only thing that ends homelessness, when someone's into permanent housing. And yet, we don't build shelters. And shelters don't work. Shelters don't work. They get you out of the elements, but if you're cycling in and out and you're always still in fear and you're sharing a bunk bed next to strangers, there's little to no chance that you're going to be changing your life. And so we don't invest in shelter. Well, maybe we're building the wrong kind of shelter, right? And so the idea is, even though permanent housing is the solution, if we can get people indoors fast and cost effectively and at scale, That takes the pressure off the system, which then allows all of the other things to happen that need to happen to really solve the problem. And I think the interesting thing that is not so obvious is that this interim model of getting people indoors fast is the intersection of 3 different points that are all equally important to your voters. One is cleaning the streets. Getting people indoors fast is going to reclaim public spaces. But it's also the humane thing to do. And the people who are worried first and foremost about the humanity of thit is the most compassionate thing we can do for them. And it's the most fiscally responsible, because leaving people on the streets costs $80,000 per person per year, and then they get $1 million apartment. This is the intersection of all sides of the aisle and all points of view. It is the logical solution. However, it is contrary to all of the programs, all of the HUD funding, all of the things that we've built over the last 10 years. And so what it takes is brave, courageous leaders to say, I'm going to do this anyway. And it is not at the expense of permanent. Let me be clear. We still need that permanent housing. But if people can get indoors and be stabilized and have a place to sleep, they may not need permanent supportive housing. They're going to need permanent affordable housing, because they'll be able to get back on their feet. And these are 2 jurisdictions that I'm proud to have partnered with, who were saying, what if we built enough for everybody on the streets? Don't chip away at it, 30 rooms here. What if we really did the whole community? And Santa Barbara was the first to do that. You know what happens is the private sector shows up. All those donors who have donor fatigue, donating to this shelter and that shelter, all of a sudden, if you're really going to end this problem, you've got a lot of philanthropy out there with a very real vested interest in seeing this problem solved. And the departments themselves need to put their money toward permanent housing. If you add up all the balance sheets that have been negatively impacted by people being on the streets, you would have plenty of money to get this done quickly. And so interim housing is pushing water uphill. It has been. However, now that it's a proven model, we're starting to see this take more and more roots. And this bill is a very important step in that, because it is validating and saying interim housing is one of the valid tools, even though it doesn't solve homelessness forever. We are embracing this, and we're going to help cities treat it with emergency powers. Emergency. It is a shelter crisis, and we are extending the emergency provisions that say, let's do this fast and at scale. That's what emergencies require. So 2 of the jurisdictions that have embraced this the most, proud to be here, and I hope that they are examples for others as we bring everyone indoors, do the humane thing, and end the crisis on our streets. Thank you.
Well, now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Alanaya Wiley. She has been part of interim housing here in Sacramento, and I'd love to invite her up to tell her story. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Hello, everyone. I am a product of the interim housing. I came off of the bike trail out here in Sacramento. I was homeless with nowhere to go. And I went to First Step Communities. And ever since when I was there, because now I'm transitioned out to be a productive member of society. I got counseling there. I got a job there. Now I'm in permanent housing. So the first thing that we need to do is to pass this bill so that people can get in, and then they can become productive members of society based on this program. But the first step is to get indoors. So if you guys pass this bill, it will be greatly appreciated.
We'll do it.
All right, now we're going to wrap it up with Luis Morante. Luis is the Vice President of Public Policy for the Bay Area Council. The Bay Area Council has been a just tremendous partner each step of the way. The bill that did not succeed last year, and then helping craft this bill this year, and helping us push now to get it over the finish line. Luis, bring us home.
Good morning, everyone. Luis Morante with the Bay Area Council For nearly 100 years, the Bay Area Council has represented some of the largest employers in the Bay Area and tried to end many of the Bay Area's biggest problems, including the homelessness crisis and the housing crisis. We've worked on major transformational projects in the transportation space, and we're just delighted to be here today as sponsors of this bill. We work with many of our members, including Salvation Army and Dignity Moves, to bring partnership, public and private partnership together to bring about those solutions. And we are just so excited that the scale of our very large problem in the Bay Area is met by leaders who are responding in proportion to it. That's what this bill fundamentally does. As many of the people who've already spoken today have so eloquently talked about, California's crisis is uniquely bad in the United States. There's just one point I want to make in addition to what they've said. The state of California has over 50% of the entire nation's unsheltered homelessness population. That exposes those people to greater rates of domestic violence. It makes it less likely that they're going to get permanent supportive housing. It makes it less likely that they're going to be able to maintain or obtain stable employment. These are problems that this bill and shelter generally are going to solve. We're strongly supportive of this bill, very lucky to have the public leaders behind us that we do, and really hope that you'll vote for it when the time comes. Thank you.
All right, well, we have session in about 12 minutes, so we're going to wrap this up. We might be, folks here maybe can stay for a couple quick comments. The mayor and others maybe a little longer. Thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate it.